Hello, I'm Dave Dino, and this is Champions of Justice.
We are the champions, my friend.
This is the program that takes you behind the scenes with those who make the laws and those who protect your rights through the rule of law. Your host is attorney Thomas Girardi. Bringing clarity to the headline-generating legal challenges of the day, and we've got a very different kind of a program for you today. Our guest is Phillip Maltin. Phillip Maltin has become the go-to speaker for business leaders and organizations all across North America who use his exclusive READ system for deception detection to gain advantages in professional and personal settings. The READ system is an extraordinary, research-grounded, and technique-based approach to interpreting body language and identifying liars. Phil is a partner in the employment law and commercial law departments of Gordon and Rees, LLP, a national law firm. And from time to time, Phil still prosecutes crimes for the city of Los Angeles through the fellowship program of the prestigious Trial Advocacy Project. He has been repeatedly voted a Southern California super lawyer and is a nationally recognized expert in deception, detection, and body language. Mr. Maltin combines his noted experience cross-examining witnesses and influencing jurors with years of evaluating and analyzing scientific studies on body language, facial expression, and deception detection techniques to offer fascinating insights that leave audiences not only more informed, but indeed entertained. And unlike other so-called body language experts, Phillip Maltin combines practical experience with the actual science of reading people, which in turn offers real strategies that anyone can use to uncover subtle behaviors that mask or even broadcast unintended messages about what a person is really thinking and feeling. This is because Phil's READ system is the basic science-based body language system that emphasizes a technique designed to eliminate false positive findings. So today, get a little bit closer to the radio, and we'll tell you if you're telling the truth. Tom?
Hi, everybody. Hey, thanks for joining us. All right, Dave Dino, I wish I would have known this guy about 30 years ago. I could have done some detecting and probably avoided a couple of situations. But Dave Dino, this is a very interesting concept. You know, in the trial practice, especially in a courtroom and so on, you're always confronted with, is it true or is it not true? You select the jury, you get certain responses from them. Are those responses true or not true? Witnesses on the stand who saw the accident, saw the incident, expert witnesses who come in and say this, that, or the other thing. And to try to unwrap this, yes, this person is genuine, etc., is really pretty interesting. You never learn those skills to the way in which our guest has learned those skills. How can you tell when it ain't true? And so with that, I wanted to welcome this terrific lawyer, a terrific person, a great intellect, a scientist. Phil, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for the introduction, Dave. Tom, that was quite an introduction and very flattering.
Tom, it ain't fair. It just ain't fair. Look, I have enough trouble just going into a courtroom. It's uncomfortable enough as it is. And, you know, now you're going to tell me that you're going to bring in somebody who can actually tell whether I'm telling the truth or a lie. It's just not fair.
It isn't fair, but boy,
when you're
looking
at a jury, when it's being interviewed, it seems to me you have two things that you're really looking at. One is what Tom has described, and that's some of the body language as to how they just feel about the attorney who's up in front of them. The other is, are they really truthfully answering the questions before them? This is, as Tom has indicated, this is kind of the very crucial beginning of any trial, isn't it?
It sure is. And it's an extraordinarily complex moment. In voir dire, you want to get a rapport with the potential juror, and you want an honest answer from the potential juror. And if you lay over on top of that techniques for uncovering deception, this puts an awful lot of pressure on the advocate in that moment. And in those situations, I think what Tom was doing with his father could be extraordinarily beneficial, to have somebody else observing while you are in real time trying to create the rapport with the individual, particularly if you're new to the science of deception detection. And I do put emphasis on the word science because there's an awful lot of nonsense out there that people are trying to pass off as science.
All right, before we go any further, I want you to tell us a little bit of your background and experience, the training, the studying, et cetera, that you've done. So you're just not a guy who sees somebody in the jury looking askance once in a while. You got some background here.
Well, I didn't want to be one of those charlatans. What I wanted to do early in my career was to confirm a hypothesis I had, which was that great trial lawyers could look at a juror or a witness, or anybody, a judge, and they could determine whether that person was being truthful simply because a great trial lawyer has that much experience interviewing people and questioning people. So in order to try to shortcut the many years that I thought it would take to get to that point, I took myself up to UCLA after I went through a trial training program called the TAP program, the Trial Advocacy Project. I had trained to become a prosecutor and spend some time in the criminal courts. And after I finished the training and passed the course, I went up to UCLA, spent many weeks up there trying to figure out what it takes to identify liars. You know, you see these body language experts on television. You know, there was that time when Tom Cruise was jumping on Oprah's couch, and all these body language experts would tell you what it meant, or they'll tell you in this most recent campaign, Mitt Romney was standing at a podium, and he was standing with most of his weight on his left foot, and his right foot was toes down. In other words, he didn't have his foot flat. He had his toes of his right foot kind of tapping the floor behind him while he was standing at the podium. And a body language expert said on national television, Mitt Romney's not got both feet in the campaign.
Okay, I understand that, but those people aside, your training was what?
My training was to go find the best person I could in the area. And all roads led to a guy named Paul Ekman, who was the chair of the Department of Psychology at the University of California, San Francisco Medical School. And I contacted Dr. Ekman, and I spent a couple of afternoons with him over a couple of years going through his research and reviewing video clips of witnesses and other people, politicians, and learning what the real scientists, you know, the real academics were saying about what you can and can't hope to achieve through body language and microexpression science. And so my training was, as best as I could, was to really learn to read what was being published in the scientific journals about this, and not what the people, for example, who were on some network television talking metaphorically about how people were interpreting how people were acting.
You're listening to Champions of Justice with Tom Girardi and our guest Phillip Maltin. Our topic on the table today is the detection of truth and deception. Tom?
Are there real signs that you can count on?
There are some things that you can count on, but you've got to be very careful. I'll tell you one thing that you cannot count on. There's no such thing as a tell of dishonesty. There is no scientific proof that there is any one thing or several things that people will do that directly reveals dishonesty.
Tom was kind of looking for that answer for his weekly poker game.
That's true. Erica said to me this morning, because I told her that Phil was going to be on the show, and she said, you know, Tom, she heard a person from the FBI, a woman very high up in terms of this sort of stuff, saying that there isn't one issue out there because people react differently. And the fact that I start looking over to the left doesn't necessarily mean something. You have to know me better to find out, yes, that is significant, right?
That's the baseline theory of deception detection. Two theories sort of woven into one, Tom. One is neurolinguistic programming, popularly known as NLP.
And what is that?
That's actually an unscientific system that has gained a lot of traction in about the last 30 years. NLP is this, I'm making air quotes around the word science. It's a pseudoscience that is based on a number of different cornerstones. One of them is that you mirror another person's behavior in order to try to bring that person's anxiety level down and somehow make you more comfortable to the person. Now, Dave is sitting across the table from me with his arms folded on the table, and I'm doing
I noticed
the same.
you were doing that.
I'm doing the same with Dave right now, only to illustrate something that a practitioner of NLP might say is an effective technique in terms of making me feel more comfortable to Dave. NLP would also say that if Dave asks me a question, or you, Tom, ask me a question, and I'm lying, I'm fabricating a response, that I would look up to my right. So if you're looking at me, be up to my left. And that is a reliable sign of dishonesty. It's not a reliable sign of dishonesty. There are no reliable signs of dishonesty. And in fact, last year, some researchers from some universities in Great Britain finally, once and for all, published research debunking that myth that the direction the eyes go actually has anything at all to do with dishonesty. But then you are also, Tom, talking about the baseline theory, which is why is it, for example, that parents are so good, or why is it that your wife is so good at determining when you're being dishonest? And the theory goes that it's because we have people whom we're close with at a baseline, and we know how they act when they're telling the truth, and we know how they act when they're lying, or at least we think we do. And what it's based on is the concept, and I think it's an effective concept, and I think it's a scientifically proven concept of cognitive pressure. That the more cognitive pressure there is on you when you're lying, the more likely there is to be a change in your behavior in some way that tells you at least that the person you're talking with is feeling nervous or uncomfortable about something.
In other words, you can tell that they're out of their comfort zone.
Exactly. Not necessarily lying, but there's something different going on, and that's what you seize on, and that's where your investigation really begins.
Okay, so the brain then is triggering a different way in which I speak or gesture or look, etc.
Exactly.
And so if I'm here and I answer 5 questions in one fashion and then ask the next question that I'm going to be deceitful about, you will see a change perhaps in my voice, a change perhaps in the spacing of the words as I talk, a change perhaps in my gestures, etc. Is that right?
Have you spent time with this? That's exactly right. And the more significant the issue, and it's called a high-stakes moment, the more important the outcome. In other words, the higher the penalty for being caught and the higher the reward for not being caught in those high-stake moments, you're going to end up getting more cognitive pressure because there's more to gain or to lose. Versus, the perfunctory moment, Tom, where we met this morning and you said, "Good morning, how are you?" And I said, "I'm fine." It's a perfunctory moment. If I'm not fine, it doesn't matter.
You might have had a terrible morning.
Right.
Right.
But the normal response is, "I'm fine." You don't want to bring that to this situation.
Yeah.
How are you this morning? I'm fine. Did you rob the liquor store? Well, now here's a little different issue.
Might be a little cognitive pressure on you if you, in either case, actually, if there's something to lose, if you're telling the truth and you didn't, there might be some real cognitive pressure. For example, in the interrogation room in the police department, if they don't believe you, you've got a lot to lose.